Okay, so welcome everybody to this April 29th Tech Talk. We're really excited to be talking about Guardium REST APIs. This is a new capability that we added a patch or two ago, but we've really beefed it up in GPU 200, which came out a couple weeks ago, I think. And Joe DiPietro, who many of you know, is our Center of Excellence lead, and Guy Galil, who's the technical lead for this project. He is out of our Jerusalem lab, so they will be presenting and demonstrating the Guardium REST API, which is a great new capability for integrating Guardium with other systems and other business processes. Our next talk is getting started with InfoSphere Guardium vulnerability assessment. We haven't had any talks on vulnerability assessment so far, so I think it's important that we do that, especially now that we do have a new vulnerability assessment evaluation download on DeveloperWorks. And so we're going to talk a little bit about kind of an introduction to vulnerability assessment and things you can do with it, and a demonstration as well. And then we'll be following up with a deeper dive on more technical best practices and how to use vulnerability assessment, and that will include one of our business partners who's actually created a vulnerability assessment for PeopleSoft using custom queries.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kathy, and thanks, folks, for joining. Today we're going to be covering a lot of content with REST API, and we'll also go over a number of different applications to kind of give you a feel for what the capability is. So what I'd like to do is just talk briefly about some of the case studies. We'll be looking at data sources and groups, some reports, how you can interact groups with policies and do a policy install. We'll look at a risk model and look at some of the security and operational aspects. And Guy from our development team is going to be helpful with doing that later on in the presentation. So I thought I'd just give you a quick background. What is REST API? And REST stands for Representative State Transfer, right? And basically what it is that many new applications are using REST as a tool from the development perspective. And REST is with mobile, social apps, and a lot of automation with business processes within our customers, right? So every one of you folks on the phone, from an operational perspective, there are different applications being used with REST because it's an easy way to programmatically get access to information and to help automate tasks. So as you know, Guardium always tries to leverage whatever the existing infrastructure is that our customers use to try to make it easier for you to integrate our system so that you can accomplish the tasks that you need to deal with. How does it work? So it leverages existing technology like HTTP, XML, and so forth, and JSON. And it works on unique resource indicators, URIs. So in the case of Guardium, our unique resource indicator is very similar to what you log on with the Guardium GUI. The IP address 8443. But then the URL starts with REST API. And then if I have data sources, for example, that means that I'm going to use the REST data source API in order to send and receive information. REST has a limited number of operations like get, post, put, and delete, and these are all verbs. And we'll go into a little bit of how this works as we go through the presentation. But one basic thing that you need to understand is in order to make any application access Guardium, you have to register it. And there's a Guard API command in order to register your application. So why don't I, flip over to here, and hopefully you all can see my screen. And on the appliance configuration, what I need to do is I need to execute a command. So this is the Guard API command that I would need to execute, Guard API register OAuth client ID, and you'll see the response that comes back. The response is the client secret. This is the key element of what we need to use in order to run our REST application. So as you can see up here, I'm kind of in a development mode right now, and I've got a couple of client secrets here. You would never put these on a web page for everybody to see unless you're doing a quick demo, right? But you need to protect this, and Guy's going to go into great detail on how to protect it later on in the presentation. But for purposes of my piece, I have a username and a password, and these are all the same Guardium UI usernames and passwords, and then I've registered my client ID. So on my application, when I click Get Access Token, what happened was I'm talking to this client, this Guardium appliance, using the admin user account with my password, and I'm using my client ID, which was already authorized by that Guard API command, and I received an access token. This access token will be good for a certain duration of time, all right? And what we'll do now is we'll just kind of flip back to the presentation, and this is what happened behind the scenes. So I've registered my Guard API, I've saved my client secret, and now I sent an access request for an access token to the Guardium appliance, okay, and it replied back with an access token. Okay, so now anytime I want to activate any kind of Guard API, I can do that, but I have to also provide my access token when I make the request. Okay, and as an example, this is a little spreadsheet that we did, and what you can do is use the spreadsheet to help you create these commands. And so, and you save your client secret over here. If you're looking at playing around with this, this will be a good tool for you. And it uses curl. Curl is a Unix command that's very popular, so it will allow you to access this information. And then you have a place, once you access that, and you get an access token, then in the spreadsheet you can save that command so that you can access, or if I want to create a data source now, then I have the command. Here's a curl command to create a data source, and it plugs in, you can see over here, this is a JSON formatted element that the Guardium appliance is looking to see when you access this data source. So this will be how easy it is. You can kind of start off with a little spreadsheet as a tool to do this. But I thought a better use, as opposed to going through a whole ton of slides, let me go back, get my access token, and let's walk through a little scenario. Okay? So I know many people want to integrate in and get some server risk metrics. Okay, so maybe you're looking to analyze what's the failed login ratio to the SQL statements that you get. Or maybe I have a bunch of SQL errors and they should be very, very small, if not negligible, not zero, on production servers to all the SQL statements that are executed. Okay, so you can populate your own risk analysis tools. Well, more importantly, some people want to have an operational dashboard. So for me, here's my operational dashboard. And what I did was I went out to the Guardium appliance. I got a listing of all my database servers. I have some in core banking, some in retail, some in cards, some in HR. And there are different color codes for if something's working well or if, the servers have some type of issue. And if you notice, I also have integrated this in because it's a main dashboard for all of my IT infrastructure with some web servers and also with my routers and network information. So you can integrate in your Guardium system with an operational dashboard using REST API to go out and query a report from the Guardium system. So from here, I noticed that I didn't like what I saw in my core banking application, and so I want to analyze that server a little bit more. So let me look at what the server data is. So I clicked the button and I got my favorite reports. Okay. So what are the total failed logins that were happening on the server? What are the number of database users that access the server? So in some cases, if you have an application server that's doing the majority of the work, then the count of database users should be very, very, very small. If I see this going up, that means a lot of people are accessing the server with unauthorized either credentials or other information. So this gives you a little bit of a risk indicator as far as how many people in production are accessing your server. All right. The next statement goes down into the count of client IP addresses. I should have a very small amount of client IPs, maybe the production server, and maybe if I let a DBA connect to it from a proxy server or jump server, right? Something like that. And then we have this other statement which goes into the count of SQL, and this is more Guardium terminology. So this is the total SQL constructs that this database server has seen, and it's only 24. And then if you're familiar with Guardium, you can do a log full details. And this shows me the total full SQL constructs, which includes bind variables. So it's a little bit more than my SQL constructs. And then the total accesses that the system was using. And so I don't know if I can do this, but Kathy, let's give this a try. And Kathy's going to help me out, right? Because I want a polling question. And let me set up the system. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute a command, and I'll show you what this is. Okay, it's a little script. And what I've done is I connect to the database, and you can see that I've inserted a whole bunch of values into my table, and at least 500 records or so. So my question for you is going to be, of these three items, the count of SQL, count of full SQL, and total access, how many of these things are going to change? All right, so let me see if I can get this polling question up. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and we're going to activate the polling question, and I'm going to conduct it. So we're going to give you a few minutes here, and I'd like to see if all of the information is going to be updated, if the count of SQL, the count of full SQL, or the total access. So once I see some votes, that'll be good. We'll leave this open for another minute. And the interesting thing about this is you can really look at it from a total risk perspective. Because when you have production servers, what's going to happen is the structure of the SQL statements are really going to give you ideas into how much has your application changed. Okay, so let me, hopefully everybody sees the polling results. Okay, so a lot of people think that all of the above. So all of the above means the count of SQL, the full SQL, and the total access. So let me get back into sharing. All right, so let me end the poll, and 87% of the people voted for that. So let's. So let me go back on the screen, and hopefully in a second here, you'll be able to see my screen. And I'm going to hit the go back button. So now let's update. Okay. And if you notice, the count of SQL, the count of full SQL, and the were the same. So let me just give you a quick screenshot here of that. All right, so we're going to save that for a second. I'm going to execute this one more time. Okay. It's off and running. It did its thing. Let's go back, and let's show the server data now. Okay, so let me get my snapshot here, and okay, so you can see that the count of SQL actually didn't change, nor did the count of full SQL. But you can see the total access, 16 whatever, incremented. So why is that? Okay, and this is really important because if you're looking at it from a risk perspective, you can understand a lot of deviation in your environment. And let me go to one page over here. So slide number 42 is my go-to slide. Okay. So what happened is the appliance saw the construct. Okay. And the first time that we see it, the way the Guardium system works is the construct ID is created. From here, whenever the appliance sees something similar, okay, I don't need to save it again. The only thing I need to do is look at the access. So what happened was the total access for the SQL would be incremented. Okay, so I don't need to do anything with the SQL itself. So my point is, when you look at database and database risk, okay, you have in your production systems a lot of similar statements. And if you're using just the allow option to record it, you're not going to see much changes in the total count of construct IDs or the total count of the full SQL. Okay, so this could be a great risk measurement for you in order to understand if anything changes from an operational or an application perspective. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I drove home that point because the answer is the only thing that changes is the total SQL access.
So Joe, just to clarify the point, so you're saying basically if you have an application that's running the same kind of vetted SQL over and over again, if something changes there, you know there might be SQL injection or something that changed the format of that SQL.
That's 100% correct, Kathy, right? So if somebody added a SQL injection, they would have a SQL construct, and then they would have said where 1 equals 1 or where A equals A. And so that would be a new construct that we would not have seen, from most of the production applications. Okay? So that's one piece. And now another way to look at all of this data is to just click an Analyze button, right? And now you can get a graphical report. So this can be, and you can turn the colors whatever you want, whether it's green if it's acceptable, red if it's bad, yellow if it's cautionary, because I'm in, all my SQL errors over here, right? So in this particular report, this shows me how many client IP addresses had SQL errors. This tells me that only 2 database usernames had SQL errors, and I have 5 unique types of SQL errors. And here's my total count. So a lot of times when you do your risk analysis, just getting a count of these reports is going to be very helpful for you. And REST API can help you because there's a minimum amount of data that's going through. So as we go through this, I analyzed my server. I didn't like what I saw on one particular database server, so I want to do a vulnerability assessment. So I'm going to go here. I can look at what my server content rating is. So for my core banking application, it's a high rating. I have different vulnerability assessment tests set up for high, medium, and low. Okay, and then we can email the reports or look at whatever it is. The only thing I need is a data source name. So let me go and analyze the server. Okay, and what this does, this is similar to Guard API. It gives me a unique ID that tells me that this was successful. So what I just did was I executed a vulnerability assessment test on my Oracle database for the one that showed me in my dashboard reports that it had suspect information. All right, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, and you'll see, the details of what the vulnerability assessment was. But what did I need to do within REST API in order to identify and be able to execute a job that had a vulnerability assessment test? Well, most of our tests need some kind of data sources. So what I have here is I have a data source. Right, so this is a new screen, and anybody can create these types of screens for automation and to glue things in. All right, and my goal was just to give you a simple screen so that you can see how to use the REST API. So for me, I can have a list data source by name, okay, and this shows me all the gory details. I didn't happen to parse this. I wanted to show you this one specifically in this format because many people use JSON, JavaScript object notation, in order to program. So I wanted you to see a native JSON object. Now, if I don't like that data source, I'm just going to delete it. Okay, and this gave me a delete, so I deleted my data source. Okay, if I try to list it again, I'm going to get some kind of error. And that shows me the error that I couldn't receive this data source. And now what will happen is maybe I want to create a data source. So I don't like this particular Oracle one, no offense, but let me go to a Sybase. So I create a data source, and this tells me it was successful, and there was my data source. Okay, so then if I do a listing of that data source, now you can see what the name was, the DS name, okay, the port, server, and so forth. Okay? So data sources is part of a prerequisite in order to run a vulnerability assessment test. And behind the scenes, when I do these commands, they're all REST APIs or Guard APIs in order to integrate the system. So we've done a little bit with data sources. The next critical thing that we typically deal with is groups. And so I know many people, when you have application developers and they roll out a new production system, you have to ask them and say, give me a listing of what the objects are that are sensitive so that I could put that in a policy. So very similar to how we had data sources, I can do a group listing. Okay, so my group name is gname over here, and I can list by group ID. So it all depends on how you want to get access to the information within the Guardium system. If I don't like this one, I can delete it. So I can delete the group description, and very similar. What happened was, in my program, I said, this is Guard API, delete group by description, and then I gave it a description name. So this is how the Guard API would work, okay? And now let's go list some of the members or the group names. So let me go create the group because I just deleted it. All right, so there was success. I created a group. I'm going to list the group members by description. So for these buttons, I tried to use what was similar for the Guard API so that you could see, the correlation. All right, and I don't have any members in this group, so I have 0 members. So I can add a member to the group, and you can see that that was successful. I can list it again, and now I have 1 member in the group. If I want to automate this for somebody, maybe my application development team, just give me a web form where I can cut and paste just the sensitive object tables that I need to integrate in and automatically put that in a Guardium group. Okay, so in my little program, I have this application where I see a comma. It's going to create multiple, it'll allow the members to automatically be created. All right, so, and lo and behold, I executed this statement, okay, and it added 4 elements to my group. And now if I go to list the group members one more time, they're all my group members. Okay, so you can easily create integration pieces to help you automate different parts of your IT infrastructure. Okay, and then, God forbid I screwed up, and as you can tell when I'm testing a lot, right, I'm going to delete all the members from the group. Okay, so I deleted all the members, deleted 5 members, here's my success, and now if I go back and list my group members, there are no members in there. So this is a simple web form so that somebody could integrate in creating something within a group. And I'm sure you guys are thinking about your imagination of how you could implement pieces of this today, all right, within your own systems. So what we did was we looked at a little bit of server risk. Let's see if my vulnerability assessment is done now, because I spawned off that report, and I showed you a little bit about data sources and groups. So if I go over to my Guardium system and I look at my security assessment, I'm going to look at my REST API vulnerability assessment, okay, and lo and behold, here's my results. And you can see that my assessment was executed, I don't know, 6 minutes ago. So this was executed because on the web form I said, go execute your vulnerability assessment. So why would this, or how could you use this? A lot of times, many folks have a security operations center. And within a security operations center, they have different dashboards and pieces like that. So if they identify that a database server is under risk, and they see, different color codes that says, okay, there's a vulnerability and we need to issue something. This gives you an ad hoc way so that the Guardium administrator doesn't necessarily have to be involved in running the report for you. Okay, so you could set up this Guard API. Now I can look and see what's going on here. So I can get a summary. I have privilege assessment tests where 13 have passed, but 17 have failed. God help me, what's going on, right? So here, I'm going to look at my failed login attempts, okay, and this isn't within my threshold, right? So there's a specific recommendation for failed login attempts on a parameter within an Oracle database that should be set, and it's not set. Okay, so by default, you're going to have a limit of 10 according to a profile, and we recommend you to do this. Oh, by the way, here's some external references that are very important from a security industry best practices perspective that tell you how to set it, right? So I have my STIG reference number here, I have my CIS benchmark, and then there's probably other references as well. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of visibility into how to integrate in the vulnerability assessment test with your REST APIs. Okay, and then lastly, there's a couple of other pieces that I want to go through. Everybody wants, a quick report. So I've integrated 3 reports. If you have an auditor and you don't want to give them access to the Guardium system, you can do 1 or 2 things. You can give them, okay, here's the people that are logging into the Guardium system. So I can click a button. I know that the POT user, the admin user logged in, when they logged in and logged out. And if you look at this one, this is interesting. I don't have a logout date. And that happens to be because I'm still logged in. So here's my Guardium window where I'm logged into the system. Okay, and that's why that report, shows no logout date. Okay, so let me go back. Another one is the failed logins, right? So here are the failed logins. This particular user only has access to the database server 10.10.956, and he goes and can see all the failed logins. You can look at apps. So for those people that are more familiar with Oracle EBS, there's a database user account called apps, and he's failed login 5 times coming from the same server. So something's going wrong there. Either a DBA or somebody may be trying to hack into the system, right? So there's your failed login report, and then you can get your SQL error report. So any report that's available in the Guardium system, you can pull and glean information for. I wouldn't recommend large bulk reports that are going to get 2 million rows. We have a different method for you to get access to that. But if you're looking for just a quick scenario of give me some visibility and don't let me bother the Guardium administrator, you can really integrate a lot with REST API. And this is part of how you could do it within the framework that we've shown you. So the next piece of what we typically go through is looking at policies. So just like we have an application team that can plug in, here's my group of sensitive tables. Now maybe I want to push the policy down. So for me, I have a V9 production policy. Let me list the rules that are involved with that. So I know that I have 11 rules within this policy. And let's go back here just to give you a little feel for the policies. Okay. And lo and behold, V9 production policy is installed. And if I look at editing the policy, here are my 11 rules. So this will give me some level of insight into that aspect. And then if I want to install the policy, I can click a button to install the policy. This tells me that the policy was installed successfully. And just like any piece that we do with REST, I can have separation of duties. And Guy's going to talk about this later on, of how you can have a different role and responsibility. So depending on who's getting access to this web browser screen that you integrate, that'll tell them if they can install a policy or not. Okay? And if I go to my Guardium system, let me click the policy install button. And if you notice right here, I installed the policy before around 10:56 a.m. And lo and behold, that executed a minute ago. Okay, so for my policy install. Now, we mentioned the thing with the groups. Similarly, what I did was, in my web form, if I have a security event that I want to deal with, and maybe I have sensitive REST objects, let me list the members, okay, and I have 4 members of this group, okay. If I want to add a member to the group, let's add another member, credit card. Okay, so credit card was now added to the group of sensitive objects. And if I do a list the member, you can see credit card is now in there. Now I could install my policy again because I've updated my groups, where I could have automated this whole process of installing the policy. So if you want to integrate in with other security systems, you could have one group element where there could be a policy that said, alert me if any objects in this group are accessed, or prevent and block people from coming from a different IP address because I'm in a shutdown mode. So now I can upgrade and integrate any of my policies using REST API as well. So Kathy, you know what I'll do? I'm going to take a quick minute and pause and see if there's any questions in the chat, and we'll kind of answer those if there's any in that point.
Thanks, Joe. There was some discussion about the token and if you need a token for each command, and I think Guy answered that in the chat. So you can use it for as many requests as you want as long as it's not expired. And I want to point out also that there is a Developer Works article that goes into more deep, a little bit more of the syntax and how you call it and all that as well. So there it is.
So as you know, I'm just a puppet for Kathy, right? So she asks and we pop this stuff up. So This is a great article, and I really encourage you guys, if you're interested in reading this or trying to integrate in with some other stuff, they did an excellent job on talking about where it fits and looking at your access tokens and things like that. And I'm sure there was a note in here from Guy, okay, on the access token and when it expires. Okay, so there's an expiration time as well.
So a couple questions have been coming in. How many lines to write for such scripts? I'm not sure what he means.
So I'd rather answer it like this. Everything that you saw me do, I've been working on this probably part-time for about 2.5 weeks. And the piece that I was excited this morning because I told Kathy, I had a couple of bumps in the road, but this morning I got the vulnerability assessment done, the ability to execute the vulnerability assessment test done within 2 hours. Okay, and then I'm going to go show you one other piece. Well, I'm sorry, Kathy, any more questions? We'll kind of go back to the questions. If there are any...
Is it possible to add rules to a policy through the REST API?
Yes, absolutely. So, and there's a great, let me see if I can pop this up. There's the ability to get help within the system. And what I did was I downloaded the help when you make a command. And if you want to do a rule, let me just do a search on policy. Let's see what pops up. Okay, so here's policy from, policy to, new descriptions, and rules. So what I'm showing right now is the help. Okay, so I can copy policy rules, create them, and so forth. So let me take a step back. The way that REST works is you have an API and a resource name. So if I'm interested in copying a rule from a policy, right, I execute this command with the REST API URI, and then I have parameters. This tells me if the parameter is required. So I need the from policy, which is required, okay, and the to policy. That's another parameter within Guard API that's required, and that's true, okay? And then you can give a target. So you can update a rule in a policy if you wanted to. You have rule descriptions and so forth. So there's a slide that I'll show you on how to get help in a minute, but hopefully that answers your question. All right, Kathy, any other questions?
I don't think so. Wait. Nope, we're good.
Okay, all right, awesome. So a lot of times, what I mentioned before about reports, right, is you may not want to use this for bulk reporting. So let's go through a little scenario here, and I'm going to jump back into my, my PowerPoint here. But I just need to find what slide to get to. So we're going to go to slide number 20. All right, so let's go to PowerPoint, go to slide 20. So I have a process, right, and I want to integrate in with my existing business process, okay? So what we're going to do here is we have customer systems that need to correlate just a piece of information, and then within Guardium, this is an industry standard way using REST API in order to integrate in with your custom app. So over here I have an application owner, okay? And they're responsible for their applications, and when something goes wrong, they want to be able to identify what happened at the database level, because maybe my performance is bad, or maybe somebody's breaking in, it's not running the way it should be, or I have a security event. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this little custom app. We're going to use REST API, and this application owner who's responsible for different server IPs is going to request information, because this report could be 1 million or 2 million rows. And what we're going to do is send the Guard API command, and then the Guardium appliance is going to send the application owner an email with the report. Okay, so the report's going to change, going to contain all of the audit data with changes to the server IP. So it could be DML structures or DDL, some things like that. So this is kind of our scenario. Now, in my world, I call that a static group report. So what I've done here is say, I've given you a web form. You can pick 6 IP addresses of database servers that you are responsible for. Okay, and if I show my group, Okay, these are the IP addresses that they can have. Okay, and let me take a listing. Here's a quick snippet. I'm only going to give you 20 lines of this report, which is the default in version patch 200 of what the Guardium appliance will send back for a report request. But now let me go and email this report. So I simply click the button, set up the email, and now I know that this this audit process has been created, and now it's going to be delivered. So let me, on the back side of this, I've got to talk for a minute or two so that I can get my audit process open. Okay, and lo and behold, here's my audit process. Okay, I'm going to double click on this to open the attachment. Let's go look, and bang. So now I have all of that report, and as you can see, this is very critical, right? My demo actually worked. So you select the A from dual and things work. Okay, so that was another piece of the integration, all right, of what you can do. So I think hopefully you've gotten a good demo of this. Now what I'll do is I'll click through a couple of slides so you can see some of the details behind this. Okay, and let me start off with slide number 10 here, and we'll jump through this. And then Guy's going to take over for me in about another 5 minutes here. So what we want to do is just go to slide number 10. Okay, I mentioned before that REST API, it uses the HTTP, right? And we use gets and posts and puts and deletes. Okay, and here's your code. How do you deal with the Guardium version of this? So if you want to list a data source, for example, you're going to use a get. If you want to create a new group, you're going to use a post. If you're going to do an update to an existing group or a data source, then you're going to use a put. If you're going to execute the audit process results, you're going to use a put, okay, for example. And then if you're going to delete something, delete member from group, you're going to use delete. So here's an example of listing a data source, creating a data source, and you can see here's your REST URI for the action that the Guardium appliance is going to take. And then in some cases you need to pass a JSON object. So you need to format it in a specific way. So in this case, you pass it like this, okay, and this is your key and then your value pair. So I have a key of password and a value of Guardium. I have a key of name and a value of MS SQL. So this happened to be my data source name. Okay, and then if you're going to delete something, you can delete it by ID. And here's my key, my ID, and my delete statement. All right. Here's an example using curl, okay, of getting a list. So I'm doing the list, and here's the specific curl statement that you would use. Notice that my access token is right here. Okay, that's what you see with authorization bearer. All right, and here's the structure of what would come back. It's that JSON object that would come back. All right, very simply, if I were to do a code snippet, okay, for this, so this is a piece of my Java code, all right, and what I did is I put in my Java URL, okay, then I open a connection to the Guardium appliance, okay, I set the appropriate parameters, and if I want to get information, right, that's like a listing, I'm going to use a get over here, so I'm going to set my connection, set request method as get, okay, I need to put in my token, right? So I have my token in a variable, so I add that onto the string, and then I open my buffer reader to the Guardium appliance because I sent the request, and now over here I'm going to get the reply. And for me, I put the reply in a string buffer, okay? I disconnect with my connection is done, and then you can have your JSON results, okay, and go and parse it or show it, do whatever you like there. So this is a little code snippet of my particular application. All right, I showed you in the demo all of these pieces, so I'm not going to go into detail on the data source or creating the REST through the group, right? But this is what you would use, right? Successful creation with the ID. When you add a member to the group, you're going to do a post request, and this shows me it was successful. If you're going to list the members of the group, right, you're going to use a get resource, and that's a successful with your JSON object. And this is the structure of what you would see, and parse it out accordingly. And this is really key. If you want to get help within how you do it, you do a get request, and you put in this URL, okay? And then everything that will come back will be all of the different options that you can use within REST to get your different REST API pieces. If you want to get help with a specific parameter, what you do is you put a question mark. This is HTTP encoding rules, right? So with my resource ID, and give it a resource number. So this will tell me the help on this resource ID with ID number 4, okay? And it gives you all of the parameters that are required in order to execute this REST API, okay? So we went through all this in detail. I gave you screenshots of what my application looked like, listing members of group, looking at the reports, looking at your application development team, so that you'd have at least a reference for this. Looking at the server risk, and I think hopefully everybody learned something about this piece of the equation, right, where you have SQL constructs and you have full constructs ID, and that may not change, only total SQL access will change. And this is a good number to keep for your application folks and your database folks so that they understand how busy the database server is, and it gives you a good way to profile that. Right? So this is under the server risk element. Right? We can create dashboards, and we can integrate this in with other dashboards from your other systems. So now I'd like to turn it over to Guy to help look at some of the security implications and some other implications that you may deal with as you roll this out in your production systems.
Joe's demo was great, and he showed a lot of the capabilities that are available through REST API. I want to reiterate and emphasize a few points. And the first one and most important is security. So Joe, can you skip to the next slide? So the Guardium system is a security system, and it has a lot of sensitive data to your organization, and it controls and monitors a lot of sensitive processes. So of course unauthorized access to this system is a very bad thing, and the REST API exposes the Guardium functionality to the world in a way that was not available before this was implemented. So security is a major issue here. The security of the REST API is multi-layered, multi-tiered. So the first level is the communication must be SSL. It must be configured as SSL to allow encryption of on-the-wire transportation, and the verification that the server is who he states he is, and the client is who he states it is. This is a requirement, and it's outside the scope of our implementation, but it's a requirement for the security of everything. If somebody can breach the SSL and listen on or sniff on the actual transportation, they can capture the client secret and the token, and they can compromise your system. So the first layer is SSL. Then, as Joe demonstrated, to access the REST API, you first need to generate a client secret, and this is generated by the Guardium administrator through the Guardium CLI. This is the CLI is an authenticated session run by the Guardium administrator, and he generates the client secret, and he gives it to an integrator or to a program, an application developer, so that needs access to the Guardium system through the REST API. Now, this token is very sensitive. You must guard it. You must store it in a secured way. You should not expose it to outsiders. You should not keep it in open, clear text form, because if somebody gets the client secret, they can generate tokens and access your systems and compromise your system. So the client secret, and the client secret doesn't have expiration date. It is a one-time operation to issue such a secret, and then the secret is alive until somebody the administrator, the Guardium administrator, revokes it. So this is a very important thing to keep it secured. The third thing is the client secret is used to generate a token. Okay, the token can be, the token is used with any REST request. The token has an expiration time. So a token, typically the expiration time is 3 hours. During this period of 3 hours, you can use the token for as many requests as you want, but after it's expired, you will get an error message if you try to use it, and you can use the client secret to generate a new token. Now, the third layer is the token itself is associated with a Guardium user and is validated with the Guardium password. When you generate a token, you put in the client secret, and you put in Guardium user and a Guardium password. The token is then associated with that user. Just like GUI modules or applications within Guardium that are allowed to different roles, Guardium API functions or REST functions, which are actually API functions, are also associated with applications and thus allowed to different roles. So when a token is used with a REST request, with a REST function request, the user that the token was created for is evaluated. If that user is allowed to execute the function, then the function will process. If that user is not allowed, then an error message will be returned. Here you can see the screen capture of the user role permission screen from Guardium Access Manager UI. You can see there is a list of applications like Access Map application, Access Map Builder, Access Policy Query Builder, and so on. And for each such application, you can set the roles that are allowed to use this application. There are many different applications in the Guardium system. So here you can see that are allowed to use Administration Console. So you can see Administration Console is one of the applications, and Admin and Admin Console only are the roles that are allowed. Any user that belongs to that role can use these applications. Other users cannot. Different API functions or REST functions are associated with Guardium applications. The configuration settings are mostly associated with administration console. There is a policy installation application. There are reporting applications, audit process applications, and so on. So when you create a token, generate a token for your REST API interface, it's a good practice to use the role, a user of the role that is specific for the requested functionality. Usually admin user or admin role is allowed to do most of the actions in the system, but it's good practice to use a more specific, more granular authentication and use a more restrictive role for your functionality. So this is about security. Now I want to talk a little bit about when to use the REST API and when not to use the REST API. And Joe's demo was great, and it showed a lot of the capabilities, and this can be a little confusing. The first tip is the REST API is intended for online system integration, integrating different software systems with Guardium functionality. Let me give an example of a use case that we mention in the article. One use cases would be to integrate your LDAP management system, user management system, with Guardium, so when a new DBA is joining the organization, then the privileged users group can be updated and applicable policies can be updated and installed, and this can be achieved as a trigger in real time and not as a scheduled batch that runs every night or every week or something like that. So this is a good example. Also, when a user leaves the organization, of course, you want, as soon as this happens, you want to be able to add this to policies, maybe to block this user from access to systems and so on. So you want to update the Guardium system in real time and integrate your user management system with the Guardium system programmatically. This is a good use case for REST API. A different use case might be integrating with physical access control, the systems that manage, the doors of your facility, to correlate users' physical location with the location from where they log into database systems. So integrating two different systems is a good use case for REST API. You can use any development language that you want. Joe's demo was written in Java and JSP, right, Joe?
Right. Yep.
And I know of a group that's writing a client in C++ and somebody who wrote a client in Python. I played a little bit with JavaScript and Ajax for that. So you can use any programming language that allows you to create HTTP requests to implement your specific functionality. When you do not want to use REST API, you do not want to use the REST API to rewrite functionality that already exists in Guardium system. If you can do it inside Guardium system, then you don't need REST API. If all you want to do is define a new data source manually, then you have the UI to do it. If you want to define a new access rule or view a report, you have the functionality to do it within Guardium. If you want to define a new access rule as an output from an external system triggering it, then it's a good idea to use the REST API. And also mass data offload. If you want to offload millions of records from Guardium collected data into a different system for reporting, for whatever you want, there are other better methods to do that. You can use the external feed, you can use the syslog interface, you can use report export as CSV. There are other methods to do that. The REST API is not intended for such usages.
I encourage everybody to join the community on Developer Works because I do put the announcements of all the upcoming tech talks and everything there. And also the LinkedIn group, Guardium Dam LinkedIn group is very active and has a lot of great participation by some of the people that are actually on this call today.